very curious about what the School Marshals Program is.
It initially was a way to arm teachers against a lethal threat. That's who went through the program initially, was almost exclusively teachers.
Some of my kids are concerned, and I've had the real talks with them, and I'm very curious about you and your position. How do you tell your kids?
If something happens where in your vicinity, run, hide, fight, get away, get out of that building if you can, and don't think that you're gonna be the hero.
School security. What are some of the big things that you, as an expert in the security space, really look into and wanna make sure of?
Protecting against external threats is the focus. Don't let a bad guy in. The problem, like everywhere, is the internal threat, the insider threat.
What's going on, y'all? My name is Vincent Vargas. I'm the host of the Time to Head North podcast, brought to you by the North Group. Security refined by intelligence.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's Vince again with the Time to Head North podcast, brought to you by the North Group. Security refined by intelligence. You guys go check them out. Obviously, if you're interested in any personal security, corporate security, or personal security, you know where to go. My next guest is my good friend of mine, Ben Jacklin, who we have worked together in the past. When he was a BORTACer and I was a Borster agent, we were assigned to the same team down in the Del Rio sector, and we did some details in the RGV Valley, right, the Rio Grande Valley. And we just spent time together, man. And so we've been friends ever since. And, you know, it's been a long time, so it's time to catch up. Ben, what's going on, brother?
What's happening, man? Glad to be here.
Absolutely. One of the things I remember the most about you is that you can sing.
Man, somehow the job I'm currently working, they found out that. I don't know how. And I had to get up in front of everybody at Christmas time in Dallas and sing some, what was it? I'll Be Home for Christmas.
Oh, man, you're in Dallas?
Yeah.
Dude.
I should have told you earlier, I go up there 1 week every 2 months also.
Whoa.
1 week in Arkansas, and then the next month I'm in Dallas, so we got to hook up in person.
Yeah, bring your guns, because I'd love to do some shooting. I'd love to train with you.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We'll do some kind of work. But, well, real quick, can you give a quick kind of like rundown of your security and tactical career up until now?
Sure. I started off, I enlisted in the Marine Corps. It sounds like a long time ago, because it is, 1987. And I was in the Marine Reserve for 6 years. I was activated twice. That was, around the time of the very first Gulf War. I didn't do anything cool. I was an armorer. I learned weapons, but I was in a recon unit, but was not a recon Marine. I was what do they call it back then? H&S. So I did a lot of perimeter stuff, but didn't get to do anything cool. Few years went by after I got out of there, and that's when I got into law enforcement. So I started off as a deputy sheriff in Southwest Texas. I was always drawn to the tactical environment, maybe because I had not done that in the Marine Corps. So they let me run with that. I was a deputy there for 3 years, and they kind of let me oversee that whole program. This would have been the early 2000s, 2003, 4, 5, 6. Training was, pay was abysmal. Training was essentially non-existent. Actually, any training that we had back then was probably the wrong training. I came to find out later. But so we just kind of flew by the seat of our pants. I had my Marine Corps experience. I had a couple of Rangers that were on the sheriff's office, and it was always the three of us through the door first, and everybody else kind of filled in the gaps. But it was fun. It may not have been tactically proficient, but it was a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun together. And then, so I was in my late 30s by that time, and the Border Patrol was going through a hiring push. They raised the age limit from 37 to 39, and I signed up. And with an eye of going to BORTAC. The first thing I did was when I found out that from a buddy, he said, hey, they're taking guys that are over 37. I went to the sheriff's office. I signed up for the Border Patrol, and then I Googled, does the Border Patrol have a SWAT team? And I found BORTAC, and that became my immediate goal. So I went through the Border Patrol Academy in 2007, went through BORTAC selection in 2009, and made it. There was 97 of us showed up for selection, 22 of us graduated. And class 26, the hard class,
The last hard class.
Right. Everybody's class is the last hard class. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But then, then on the BORTAC side of things, that's when I really started to get pretty good training. I mean, the regular agent training for a Border Patrol agent, as you know, is in my opinion, having been local law enforcement, it's much better, much higher level training, just to work the line. But then when you get to BORTAC, it really kicks it up a notch. I mean, they're bringing in private contractors for firearms and for tactics that, they're the best in the world. I don't know how to say it any other way. Delta, it doesn't get any better. And then I was in, I don't know what the guys are doing now, but I was in during a time when we had the opportunity to do volume shooting. Very few units anywhere in the federal government, including the military, can do unlimited shooting. You just go to the range and shoot until your fingers can't move. And everybody has great advice on shooting. There's tons of dudes out there that do training, and it's honestly, it's kind of all relevant, and a lot of it is good. But the application of being able to stand there and shoot 1,000 rounds through a rifle in a day, nothing can come close to what you get. All these little tweaks that you do almost subconsciously that improve your shooting, especially with the handgun, which is difficult to be good with. But I was the training officer for a year in BORTAC, and I would get calls from the range in Del Rio, and they'd say, "Hey, we got 70,000 rounds of 5.56 that we can't use. You want it?" I'll be right there with a trailer, and I would load our armory up. We were just bursting and so we would go to the range, especially me as the training officer, and work through drills and just shoot as much as you wanted. And all of the guys, their skill levels just went through the roof. I believe that changed not long after I left. But man, it was good while it was like that. It was great. And so the skill level went through the roof. So much so that now, years after leaving the team, when I don't go to the range as much because now it's a little bit expensive, but the skill comes back. I just went through the Texas School Marshal course, which is a pretty good course put on by law enforcement in Texas. 8 days, 80 hours, 10 hours a day for eight days. And it was amazing. Those are perishable skills, but it's incredible how quickly it comes back. Couple of hours on the range, and you remember all these little tweaks that you used to do to get rounds on target. So anyway, I'm going off on a tangent there, but yeah, the training at the federal level was where I got to do the cool stuff. The NDA type stuff that you can't talk about for 10 years. And that was a lifetime, dream for me. And so I was in the Border Patrol for 8 years total, 6 years on the team. And then I wasn't looking to leave really, but I got an offer from the private sector in corporate security, working for a fairly large financial services company out of San Antonio, and I took it. I do tend to get a little restless, and so I took that opportunity, went with it for 9 years, and really learned a lot about how the private sector views security, learned about risk-based analysis in the federal government. Sometimes you had some money to play with. In the private sector, every dime has to be accounted for. And so I learned about justifying every expense with a risk-based analysis that was really good. And did that for 9 years, and then got another offer. Well, also was not looking to leave, but got another offer that was an improvement over my current situation, and took that one. So now I work for a charter school company based out of Dallas, up in the Louisville area, actually. And I am executive director for safety and security for their Arkansas operation. I also have some schools that I'm responsible for in Texas. There's 100 schools that we run in Texas. I oversee 17 of those in Texas. And just taking care of government mandates that have come about, state level mandates that have come about since the Uvalde shooting, and incident response, incident management, compliance, all that kind of stuff. And also I got to kind of keep my foot in the door of being a tough guy by going through the School Marshal Program myself. So that's where I'm at
cool.
now.
So tell me about the school marshal program. So I don't know if you know this, but recently I volunteered at the kids' school. I have my level 4 here in Texas as
Oh,
well, and
nice.
so I got hired on as a reserve security because I have a full-time gig.
Yeah.
I can't always do it, but there's times when they say, "Hey, can you cover for 3 days?" I'll just take those 3 days off work. Boom, head over there,
Nice.
do the armed guard work at the school, and it's a private school as well. So it's kind of a different beast. They kind of hold their own kind of security how they choose, and it's been pretty fun to do. It's something that's like I can still wear my hat and do my
Right.
thing a little bit. But very curious about what the school marshals program is.
Yeah, well, it varies from state to state here in Texas. It's interesting. It initially was a way to arm teachers against a lethal threat, and that's who went through the program initially. Was almost exclusively teachers. Now it has evolved into something due mostly to the Uvalde shooting. Really, the incident in Uvalde resulted in the governor putting out a mandate that every school in the state public school has to have a gun in the school, a uniformed officer carrying a gun in the school. So a lot of schools have responded to that by hiring private security contractors. We use a private contractor primarily. Some schools are able to fulfill that mandate through school marshals if they have a smaller student body. But now the way it's evolving is the school districts are starting to hire retired cops, in some cases military, as full-time school marshals, and they give them a jacket that says marshal or something like that, and all they do is patrol the school, and they're there to respond to a lethal threat. Literally nothing else. They don't break up fights. They don't they don't do anything. They report if they see an incident, they report it to school staff, and they are unencumbered with anything but lethal response. So the class that I went to, for example, there was 17 of us. Only 2 of those people were teachers. Oddly enough, they both came from charter schools under my organization. The other 15 were retired peace officers of some sort. Everything from older gentlemen who had retired from a sheriff's office out in West Texas to a recently retired Austin SWAT officer, and everything in between. And so the class itself has evolved. It used to be essentially a group of civilians, many of whom were completely untrained. Now it's mostly former LE, a smattering of recently retired military, and 1 or 2 teachers. Either way, you're ending up with a gun in a school in competent hands.
Man, I would love to do that program.
It's what I was going in thinking. It was put on my program was put on by Hays County Sheriff's Office at the Alert Training Center primarily, and I was going in thinking, my local experience did not have great training, but man, these Hays County guys were locked on. I mean, I was judging it by the BORTAC standard of training, and it was definitely good. It was a worthwhile course for sure. And because so many guys were already proficient with handguns, it's exclusively handgun. Because so many guys were proficient, they were able to spend time with the 2 teachers who really weren't proficient, and they both qualified with flying colors and fixed a lot of problems. It was good. It's a worthwhile program. I'm getting that program going for our schools in Arkansas from the ground up. It's a little different in Arkansas. It's 60 hours, same amount of range time, a little bit less class time. The Texas course has a lot of focus on law, like you're sitting in the class learning about case law and things like that. It's fine. You don't necessarily need that to be able to deploy, but what is fantastic about both programs is the scenario. The scenarios are fantastic. In Texas, you go through 2.5 days of scenario, and every scenario is an actual event that happened. So they're not making stuff up.
Oh, nice.
It's not individual instructors saying, "Oh, let's make them do this." it's a real thing that happened at a school somewhere in Texas, and it's like a reenactment, except you're the school marshal and you have to make your choices, decide what you're going to do. And it's great. It's good.
Those who are listening probably, obviously, they don't know, but the Roy Elementary School hit close to home for both of us because that was our former teams who were involved in supporting that effort, which made it even more personal to me to think like, how are the boys doing and what's going on? I would have to assume you felt the same thing.
Yeah. And I talked to some of the guys, I mean, it's not my world anymore, so I don't want to push too much, but, believe it or not, when I was taking that school marshal course up there in Hayes County, this was, I don't know, 3 months ago, maybe, I was walking out of my hotel and I hear somebody yell my name, Ben Jacklin. I look over and it was Paul.
No, Paulie.
Yeah. I was like, what? So he was there for a softball tournament. I'm there going through the school marshal deal. So we met up back at the hotel that night and had a beer and just, we talked through it,
Yeah.
And, man, great guy. But it was, BORTAC got a lot of love after that, for sure.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting, during our time, BORTAC and BORSTAR weren't getting national notoriety. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think the last time BORTAC had any attention was doing Alien Gonzalez and down in Florida many years prior to that. And so, our whole thing was working these big missions. And then the next big moment was when I was at SOG for the Escape Convicts mission.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to be a part of that. But, then you fast forward, BORTAC doesn't get the notoriety that it deserves and all the action that we, and I say we as attached to BORTAC. I don't want to get it confused. I was never personally BORTAC, but we ran a lot of missions together and had a lot of fun and disrupted a lot of cartel organizations.
Yeah. It was you. I mean, I started thinking about stories, and I don't know if I'm allowed.
You're
to
more
tell.
than welcome to. You're fine.
But I mean, you and if you remember Bowman, you got of course you were a ranger, and Bowman was kind of ranger adjacent. And you guys brought some adaptive thinking to BORTAC in ways that it had never occurred. Stuff had never occurred to me. You, of course, brought your slingshot out on patrol with you with the steel pellets, which was great, completely silent. And if any pigs or there's animals out there, we're in the as close to you can get to wilderness in South Texas. And anytime some animal would get near us, you'd bounce a pellet off its backside and save the day, honestly, because if those things get too close, you're compromised. And
it's
Bowman
funny
would do this. Bowman carried a BB gun with him. He'd pull out this little BB gun out of his pack and thump these dogs. And it saved us so many times.
That is all combat experience.
Yeah.
The slingshot came to mind when I've told you before was that where our night vision was whited out during a raid. And, back then the night vision wasn't as good. And so any kind of light would kind of white them out. And I ended up throwing a rock and luckily hitting this light, knocking it out. And it was just like a really once in a lifetime throw.
But baseball skills.
Yeah. And then after in the AAR, we were all talking what are some options for that and dogs? Dogs was the other issue that we had when they come up on you or they hear you and you're just like, get away. And there was one objective where we did the whole mission, and as we're on exfil, one of the squadrons had to take out a dog because the dog attacked, right? And you're losing your security at that point. Your noise light discipline is a little off once you have to engage on something like that.
Right.
And so we started thinking about what are the answers, and we started carrying pellet guns and slingshots. And I used a slingshot since I was a kid. Right? I'll put that in my pocket all day. Yeah. And when I started carrying that in the border patrol, I remember some of the guys what is that for? I was like, I just throw it in my pocket in case I need it. It weighs very little. You know what I mean? And I remember that mission. We were trying to get to a high point on the river, and there was a suspected smugglers happening and going to be crossing at a certain time, and we're trying to get there. And these freaking pigs, these jabalina, big old bastards, were right in front of us. We were like, oh crap!
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, I have my slingshot.
It was like they were between us and the objective. And the thing is, we had good intel off a game cam of a smuggler coming in, a guide with a pistol. He was carrying a revolver in his hand.
Yeah.
So we were all jazzed up like, oh, this is going to be it. And sure enough, these pigs pop up. And you were right in front of me in our little patrol there, and I saw your pack drop, and you immediately just pulled. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like first shot. Well, you might have taken 2 or 3 shots. I don't remember, but it was like boom,
right in the butt.
I mean, they were gone, and we just continued on. It was fantastic. I was like, "That's."
I wrote about it in the book. It's in the
cool,
book,
man.
So if those of you who have not heard that story, there's a few other good ones in there with my boy here in the book. But yeah,
The other thing, I know I'm being an old man here, but the other thing I remember about you is down in RGV. I forget what little town, all those towns run together along the border down there, and we made a vehicle stop. The house had cut. We had a pred overhead, gave us intel that a vehicle had just left a house loaded with dope, I believe, and you went up and rapped to get the driver out, and his window happened to be down, and rather than open the door, you just reached through and pulled him through the window and dropped him on the road. That dude looked like, it was just like, oh my God, what's happening?
Do you remember the moment that happened? There was oncoming traffic, and I had to pull him right back out of the road because I was scared he was going to get hit.
Yes.
That was, yes.
Yeah.
I mentioned that in the book as well. So funny.
Awesome,
That's so good.
awesome.
We had a good time.
It was good stuff, man.
Those who are listening will probably have questions about it real quick. I'll go over this. That Border Patrol has a special operation unit called BORTAC. You've probably heard of them by now. I was a BOR member. I was a tactical medicine guy that was attached to BORTAC, but my background as a ranger, they treated me like I was one of theirs. I was in the stack with them. There was no difference between me and them at that time, and it was beautiful. It was a great team effort, and that continued throughout my career. But BORTAC does some serious missions. They can, the range of missions is even expanded even more so, but essentially targeted hits based on a lot of intel. We use a lot of technology to kind of assist in those efforts, and it's just a great time. Essentially, it was being a ranger here in our own country, being able to hopefully slowly dismantle the cartel's organization, and that's what we did. Me and Ben spent about 6 months together out in the fields working, doing different operations from Del Rio all the way up to the RGV sector, and it was a blast. And so those who have questions, those who are in the military now or thinking about something in the future, I highly recommend BORTAC. Their scope of training has grown since then to the point where now some of them are Halo certified, and that is something that I'm hopefully going to go with them and certify with them as well and be able to document what they're doing with that. But not even that, it's just the level of training continues to grow as they've kind of aligned themselves with the military special operations units as well. So it's a great community. It's a great community either way.
Yeah. I've heard you in the past on podcasts and different things, talk directly to guys that are in the military or shortly going to be out of the military or may be out and kind of miss the camaraderie, miss the brotherhood. The closest thing you can get to being in the military, I would say, honestly, the closest thing you get to being in the military without being in the military, without having to go overseas, being able to go home most nights is the Border Patrol. Yeah. And that dialed up to 10 is BORTAC or BORSTAR. It's, you get into those specialized units. I mean, you're working with the same guys for 2, 4, 6, 10 years. You get to know each other so well, and you get to do cool stuff together. And it's like you get to extend that military experience by a few years, and I would recommend it. I would, just like you, I would recommend it to anybody, a military or not. If you're looking for something that you can do domestically that matters, that is fun, that leaves you at the end of a career with a skill set, man, look into it because it's worthwhile.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, dude, let me ask this. I think a big question, since you're involved in the space, you've been in the security space for many years. You're someone that I go to as a mentor to ask questions. School security, what are some of the big things that you, as an expert in the security space, really look into and want to make sure of? And that's the first part. The next part is you have kids who are in school or probably recently have graduated from school. What are some things you mentally probably prepare them for as well? So let's start with the security side from just as an operator, and then next we'll talk about as a father.
Yeah. Well, we kind of, right now, everything is kind of in Texas, everything is being built around these mandates. Every school has to have a uniformed officer. Every school has to have security film put on any glass entrance and adjacent windows. So it doesn't have to be, it can't be. Anyway, it's kind of complicated, but it's not bulletproof, but it will delay an entry by at least 10 minutes. So that's another mandate. And then a third mandate is that every classroom has to have a silent panic alarm in it, which is essentially an IT project, kind of expensive. There's plenty of grants and set-asides available for that stuff. But so getting at a school, protecting against external threats is the focus. Don't let a bad guy in. The problem, like everywhere, is the internal threat, the insider threat, and that's a tough one. We have a whole department that handles counseling and mental health issues. We try to identify that stuff early. So if there's an issue in a school, the first thing we do is pull together a team that evaluates the student and the incident as well, and just see what we can do to keep it from escalating. So in the charter school space where I am, we have the option to expel kids. I think a lot of public schools don't have that option. That gives us a little extra, level of security, kind of another layer that some organizations may not have. But yeah, identifying threats, separating them into internal and external, addressing the external, which is the easy, maybe expensive, but easier part, and then working to identify the internal threats. That's the challenge. And it's not purely a security issue, unfortunately. The security issues are a little easier to deal with. It's, you got to get the right people. We have a fantastic security vendor that we work closely with. You're talking about 100 guys essentially deployed all over the state. So it takes a bit of management, which is why we use an external vendor. It would be a nightmare for us to do that ourselves. But in addition to that, you got the hardware. We have 1,200 security cameras all over the state of Texas. If you add them all up. So it's an expense. There's licensing that goes with that, with every camera, hardware, windows, locks, all kinds of things that you have to prioritize to give yourself a fighting chance at a school. And at the end of the day, it can all be compromised by an internal threat. So it's a security environment that is just, fluid and ever changing, and you're always responding to something new. We've done, so we call them threat assessments. Behavioral threat assessments is what the state calls them when you run into an incident that could escalate. And we've done many of those this year. Our schools, run the gamut from college prep all the way to dropout recovery. So we're dealing with every kind of different threat level. And it's, so far so good. We haven't had any major events, but we've definitely run into situations that had the potential, and we were able to diffuse them through that layered security approach, literally using cameras to identify issues, security guards, we use armed officers, talking students down, literally talking guns out of their waistband in some cases, really displaying some high level skill.
Yeah.
Personal skill, not so much tactical, but yeah, it's an ongoing, evolving challenge. I think that is never going to be fully resolved. You're never going to say, hey, well, I guess you could say, we've got 100% security at this school, but that's going to be an uncomfortable learning environment, to say the least. You have to do the
absolutely.
best you can and be really proactive when it comes to identifying potential threats.
And then as a father, how comfortable are you with giving your kids the reality of the situation? What are some things you probably kind of put into place? This could be prior to the kid. I don't remember how old your kids are now, but what are some things that you would recommend, or how have you handled kind of this topic? I have kids that are I have a lot of kids.
Yeah, right. That's
So I have
awesome.
some that are not even in school yet, some that have graduated school, and I have all the middle. And so,
Yeah.
some of my kids are concerned, and I've had the real talks to them. And I'm very curious about you and your position. How do you tell your
Yeah.
kids?
Like I've got one that's grown and gone, and then two teenagers. And what I tell them is, and for you and I, this is counterintuitive maybe, because we as individual men would respond very differently. But what I tell the kids is, be aware of threats. If you see anything that looks or sounds weird, come to me and tell me. And if something happens where in your vicinity, run, hide, fight, get away, get out of that building if you can, and don't think that you're going to be the hero. Yeah, I mean, I know that, but I would never tell that to a fellow officer or agent or Marine, but when I'm talking to my 14-year-old, I'm like, you know, get out of there. Don't if you see something starting to evolve, get away. I had the kids down at the Riverwalk in San Antonio a little while ago, and we go down there every once in a while just to get a change of scenery, and we were staying at this Marriott that's right on the river. And we went down to walk the river, and as we come out of the lobby heading for the river, there's kind of these enclosed sidewalks, enclosed on the sides, and right up ahead of us, there was a couple of police officers, and there was a guy, raising his voice, and it was starting to get testy. And I just grabbed them both, and I said, "This is what you do in this situation. You leave. You get
Yeah.
out. You don't. I'm not that guy anymore. I'm not the one who's responding. You two definitely aren't that guy. We just get out of here, and we
Yeah.
can read about it later on the news or TikTok or whatever." But what was it? ADD, avoidance, deterrence, de-escalation. That's your best options for personal security. Avoidance, don't be there. If you have to be there, deter the event. If you can't deter the event, then de-escalate and just try to calm everybody down. But if you're at the de-escalation point, you're probably already at risk. So that's kind of where I'm at with them. That
Yeah.
depending on the school, the environment, whatever, kids are at more risk than they think they are really. And we
Yeah.
try to mitigate that as best we can. But
I try and tell my kids about being really good leaders in their communities as well, as in, like, my son mentioned there's a kid at school, he sits alone. I said, well, then go sit with him.
yeah,
Go sit with him.
great.
Befriend him, get to know him. It's very important for us to not allow these kids to be alienated, so they don't feel, built up resentment. And it's not my kid's job to do that, but it's almost like a self-preservation of, like, hey, let's go check on this kid, and see how you can maybe bring him into the circle of friends and give him community so he feels a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Giving people a sense of belonging could really help in this world where we can never communicate with one another because we're so stuck on social media and our phones.
Yes. Yeah.
That is now a space where kids are become socially awkward, where they don't know how to come into the cool crowd, or the crowd that just feels welcoming in a sense. And so, my son, I said, my daughter, I will tell, my daughter, I'm like, save yourself, girl, run.
Right. Yeah. And that's true. I tell my kids, like, be the good guy, be the guy who says hi, who reaches out to the one who's awkward, because sometimes you're going to be the awkward one.
Yeah.
And you're going to appreciate it if one of those good guys is around there that reaches out. And because just communicating helps a lot. It keeps people from building walls and all that stuff. You get behind those walls and who knows what's going to happen, and all of a sudden there's a big conflagration. And man, most people that build walls are behind them they're alone back there. So trying to teach the kids themselves to kind of be the good guy is a challenge, but it's worth it.
Man, brother, I appreciate you spending this time with me. I know this has felt fast. We'll have to jump on another one here soon, dude.
Yeah, man.
Just spending time with you is always special to me. When you come to Dallas, please let me know. I'd love to connect.
Definitely.
Even if it's just for a coffee, dude.
I'll be there
and
in
I'll call you.
February. So
Oh, good. I'll be around. I'm in and out. You know what I mean? I know I'm
cool.
here for Valentine's Day. I also get my wife would be pissed. But besides that, we'll see. I'll shoot you a call right now. I want to just stay on and talk. But let me I'm gonna end this. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Time to Head North, brought to you by the North Group, security refined by intelligence. I'm your host, Vincent Vargas. Please don't forget to share, tell your friends. If you have any questions, any subject you want us to focus on, please put in the comments. We'll take care of that. And again, be safe. Take care.